All right, so welcome to part 2 of Module 4 on economic systems around the world. Today we're going to look at one primary ethnographic case study, which will be about the Melanesian peoples known as the Trobriand Islanders, as described ethnographically by Bronislaw Malinowski. And at the end of the session we'll also take another look at the Yanomami Indians of northern Venezuela and Brazil, or northern Brazil and Venezuela, in comparison and contrast with these Trobriand Islanders. So you see a couple pictures on the slide here of Trobriand Islanders. Here they are canoeing in the upper left scene because they do inter-island exchange, which is a very important part of their economic system and creates a political balance amongst these islands that they live amongst. And on the bottom right, you see an interesting little silo here. This is a silo that stores surplus yams. So let's start looking at these people. And by the way, I first want to draw your attention to I think the second bottom in your module, right above the still PowerPoints, which are there for you, right? You also have a study sheet that I've put in, and this lists all of the mechanisms of exchange and kinds of reciprocity we talked about in part 1 and gives definitions of them all. If you haven't yet completed the film report for the feast, definitely you can use these definitions. This is one concise study sheet, and all these definitions are also on the slides for part 1. Now, so here we are, we're looking at the Trobriand Islanders as described by Bronislaw Malinowski, the functionalist anthropologist who was very prominent as a foundational scholar, especially during the 20s into the 30s and 40s even. And really, literally, Bronislaw Malinowski wrote the book on methods, the methodology for doing ethnography, for doing an ethnographic study, as developed and exemplified right in this book, Argonauts of the Western Pacific, 1923. Argonauts means seafarers, like Jason and the Argonauts, right? And the Trobriand Islanders certainly are Argonauts. They have developed an elaborate inter-island exchange system using canoes. So, which of these fine gentlemen is the anthropologist? Well, I say that, of course, to emphasize even here a difference of race, right? Probably the anthropologist is the white guy, and here he is. Now, if we were looking at this today, then probably it could be any of these people might be the anthropologist. Maybe this fellow in the middle, has just grown up amongst these people, but maybe the anthropologist is the guy on the right. Who knows? But in the time of 1918, when Malinowski went to the field in the Trobriand Islands, you can be pretty sure he was the only white guy living amongst the Trobriand Islanders. And that does say something about otherness. We sometimes say that anthropologists are studying peoples who are other. They are trying to help us understand, quote, others. And yet the anthropologist always is the other's other. We, anthropologists, are other to the people we study. And that should never be forgotten. That idea of reflexivity that I introduced in the beginning says that we should always look at ourselves and what we bring to the field in terms of our own background and biases. And I might try to come back to that by the end of this discussion about Malinowski. I actually probably did already talk about his diary in the strict sense of the term in the history lectures, right? Where we need to see him for who he was at the time. That being said, now, the first 2 to 3 chapters of Argonauts of the Western Pacific are literally a primer still used today. When I teach methodology in ethnography, ethnographic methodology and theory, I have students read those first 3 chapters because when properly put into practice, they do constitute a primer for how to do good ethnography. And his book aims to exemplify that. Here you see his tent on the right amongst some of the huts of the Trobriand Islanders. Particularly his tent is right in a neighborhood of huts that are occupied by the chief of the island where he is at. This is a chiefdom, and so he also gets associated, this ethnographer, this anthropologist, with the chief's clan, which is another way of kind of positioning him with relation to the people he studied that shouldn't be ignored. Now, let me tell you a bit about the Trobriand Islanders and get you set up with some basic facts, and then we'll look at how their economic system works on the basis of these facts. And I can show you, I'm going to go ahead and then back with the slides. If you let me do this for a minute. Here's a picture of where they're at. These arrows, which are going in two directions, I'll explain why that is in a bit. But these represent a ring of islands we can call the Trobriand Islands. Okay. And notice they're right off of the tip of New Guinea. Now, if you were to look within the interior of New Guinea at the same time that Malinowski is doing his study, 1918 to 1923 or so, you would find a horticultural people engaged in a daily blood feud with one another, a life for a life. Remember I said feuding kind of grows out of this long fallow agriculture system of horticulturists? Well, that's what you found in New Guinea in the interior. Whereas right over here in the islands, they are still horticultural. They still use the digging stick. But because they produce a surplus of yams, their staple food, that surplus drives them into not a tribe, but a centralized chiefdom. And the fact that they're a chiefdom and what they do with that surplus is a huge contrast from what's going on in the interior of New Guinea. So, Trobriand Islanders, a chiefdom, a centralized, stratified society, like we've looked at when we looked at subsistence and economic and subsistence and political systems. They are polygynous. A man can have plural wives. And as in most polygynous systems, the more powerful and wealthy in this stratified, centralized system of the men who are within their mother's clans, because it's matrilineal here, are the most married men. In other words, the political leaders are more polygynous than the others. Some people might not marry at all. The chief might marry several women, 10, 15 women even. And it's not because he's a highly sexualized man. Sorry, folks, that's not it. It's because everybody wants to marry a daughter into the chief's clan through the chief. Now, so as a ranked or stratified society, you have the chief's clan is the noblest of all, and all the clans and lineages within those clans, because lineages are parts of larger units called clans. All of these are ranked relative to one another. And since it is a centralized system, remember, the chief is a central leader. He is the head leader. He's the main leader, or the paramount chief, we call him, or the paramount leader, the big man chief. So you no longer have individual villages, each with their little headman, like in the Trobriand Island, like in the Yanomami. But now one of those has become bigger than the rest, big man chief. That man's clan and lineage are the highest ranked. And people give tribute or gifts to that chief's clan. In this case, because surplus is yams, this surplus goes up through gifting, I'll show you how, to the chief and his mother and sisters, because his matrilineal, he serves on behalf of his mothers and sisters who own the yams and the yam fields. And then they have so many surplus yams, they have to give it back out in terms of provisioning everybody. And that's why people give gifts, because they'll come back to them in the form of services. So, they are horticulturists. They grow yams with a digging stick. They do not have plows or irrigation. Yet, we call them advanced horticulturists because of the surplus. And that makes all the difference. So yams are the heart of much of Trobriand life, both materially and symbolically, as it says here. There are two types of yam gardens. One is more ceremonial. Trobriand Islanders can grow ceremonial yams that are 15 feet long. I think I have a picture later I can show you. They don't eat those yams, but a chief might give that kind of a ceremonial yam to a trading partner of another chief on another island, and we'll look at that. And most yams, of course, are not like that. They're utilitarian to eat staple yams, and that's what fills most of their silos. So they're matrilineal, as I said. Men are the chiefs on behalf of their sisters and mother who own the lands the men work on. And there are 4 major matriclans, but the chief's clan is highest amongst all. So you may have several clans on the same island, but the chief's clan rules them all and has a whole navy at his disposal. I don't expect you to memorize or go looking for a definition of this term, viri, avunculocal residence. What it means is simply this. Men work the land of their mothers and sisters, but their mothers and sisters have moved out to live with their husbands. That's called patrilocal. A woman goes to live with her husband. But that husband is on his mother's land, and a woman's sister's or son's land, is living on her lands. Because the men are working the fields of their mothers and sisters, even though their mothers and sisters have moved out. But they still own that land that their sons or brothers are working. So, a woman over here who's married in with her husband on his matril land, raises the kids there, but one of the kids, especially like a boy, like say about 12 years of old, will be sent over to his mother's brother's land where he's working his mother's and sister's land. So, the boy is sent to live with his mother's brother, that's avunculocal, right? So that he will inherit taking care of that land, again, still on behalf of his mother's clan. I hope that wasn't too convoluted. I think you get the picture, I hope. Men work fields on behalf of their mothers and sisters. So a nephew of a man working the land for his sisters and mother will come live with his other kids so that he will take over care of that clan land. Because men belong to their mother's clans, but they don't transmit it. Clans only transmit through females. So a man's son does not inherit from him. The son inherits from the mother, his wife. Wow. Well, we look at kinship next, but I'll give you a little image of why that's so important. So, you have these matrilineal extended families, that's the kinship unit, that own yam gardens worked by the men, while the women live elsewhere. When it comes to time to plant and to harvest, the extended family members of the clan come back to their clan land and help work the land. If it's a highly ranked clan or lineage and they have more land than others, therefore they produce more yams than others, they may need additional help, not just the family members. And they will bring in then garden helpers, which could be from lineages or clans that do not have as much land. At harvest time, here's what happens to the yams. First, the matrilineal extended family fills the silos that belong to them, their matrilineal silos, with yams to support them for the year. But if there's a surplus of yams, more land equals more yams, higher in the system is more land is more yams, something happens to that surplus, divided in 2 ways. 1/2 of any surplus is given immediately to those people who were brought in to help with the larger lands, and they take those yams back to fill the silos of their matriclan to help provide for them throughout the year. So it helps them to be cooperative with the higher ranked peoples, especially the chief's clan. The other half of that surplus is a very interesting, becomes a very interesting gift called urigubu. 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 Urigubu gifts. So, a man receives gifts. Here, I better show this a little bit better, then you can see it here. These men who are working their sisters and their mothers' fields, right, are going to give yams through their sisters to their sister's husband and his sister's and mother's clan. So men give excess yams to their sister's husband's clan. Now notice what happens if a man is many married, polygynous. This man is receiving yams from his wife's brothers, who are sending yams to their sister's husband. But he has another wife, and those brothers are also sending yams through their sister to his clan. And let's say he has 20 wives. Each man, he's the chief, and he's the many married man, the big man chief. And he's got 20 wives, and all those wives' brothers are sending all of their excess yams that they've been working for on behalf of their, of their clans, to their sister's husband's clan. Therefore, the chief's clan, let's say he's the many married man, receives all this excess of yams, all this excess yam surplus. So now what matters is what happens to that surplus. Especially all these extra yams the high-ranked people, especially the chief's clan people, are receiving from their sisters, from their wives' brothers, And there are a number of things that happen. And I want to check the slides to see if I've got some pictures that might help you a little bit. Oh, not quite yet. Okay. The first thing that happens is that during the year, after the harvest and after all these urigubu gifts are given out to everybody, because everybody gives urigubu gifts if they have surplus, right? But the chief, because he's the many married man, has received more of these urigubu gifts than anybody else. Is that an easier way to understand it? So now, after the harvest and all that's taken place, the chief's clan, like his mother and sisters and him, organized this big giveaway feast. Very interesting to contrast this with the Yanomamo feast that you're seeing. This is a much bigger ordeal. And here now, the chief's people give away all these excess surplus yams, especially to people who don't have enough in their silos. That's a redistribution feast. All right? It's an immediate, it's here. You get the surplus. Take care of yourselves. Make sure you've got enough yams. We're going to provide for you through the whole year. Secondly, the chief organizes a canoe expedition. And this is an inter-island trade trip. Now, let's say that there are 300 men amongst the various clans that the chief rules over on an island. And let's say they're going to take a trip, a trade trip to another island. But he can only bring, let's say, 30 men with him in the boats. Let's say, they're going to take, 5 boats, and each boat can have 6 people plus all the things they're going to bring to trade. So, at the redistribution feast, not only are the excess yams given out, but also the chief organizes a canoe trip to find, and he selects, let's say, these 30 out of 300 men to come on the trade trip, and they're going to benefit if they come. I'll show you how in a bit. So he selects them based on how cooperative have they been and how generous have they been with the chief's clan through the year. So the chief has the opportunity to raise or lower the ranking of people of the different clans and their lineages by whom he selects to go on the canoe trip this next time. He also gives out special gifts called kula. Kula is a word for like valuable. There are two kinds of valuables. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And these are kind of jewelry type valuables, but they also are special gifts that also, based on how valuable these gifts are, we're going to kind of raise or lower people in relation to the chief. Okay, so let's look a little further and then we'll look at some more pictures. Now, the chief will then organize these trade trips, right? And he'll bring, let's say, 30 men on the trip with him. And there are things that happen when he gets to that other island. And by the way, they might take one trip clockwise in this ring of islands and another counterclockwise in the ring of islands. And I'm going to show you some pictures here to explain this a little bit better. All right, there are two kinds of kula. There's white shell mawali, which are armbands. White shell mawali are kula items. And red shell sulava, or necklaces. Red shell necklaces, white shell armbands, and both of these are very valuable ceremonial gift items. Some of them are very old and very valuable because they have been circulating. The red sulava, the red necklaces, have been circulating clockwise, and the white armbands have been circulating counterclockwise. Every time the chief takes a trip to a neighbor island and he goes around in a ring, let's say that you have here like A, B, C, D, E, F, G around the ring. This time we're going to go to B. Next time we go clockwise, we'll go to D, right? And if we go counterclockwise, let's say we're going to go to F, and then we'll go to C or something like that, okay? So they alternate going forward or backward in the system on their canoe trips, bringing these red necklaces or the white armbands, either case, as gifts, kula valuable gifts, primarily from one chief to the chief of another island they're visiting. And these valuables have a lineage. Some of these ceremonial kula valuables of the chief's kula valuables, may have a lineage of like 30 generations, and everybody knows the value of these very important. And the important thing about it, though, and this is something that Bronislaw Malinowski troubled himself over, is that the value of these special, very, very valuable items, which might even be compared to like the crown jewels of Europe, but the chief doesn't keep these valuables. If any chief were to hold on to these valuables for too long, they would think it would bring bad magic to their people and destruction for them. The highest value of these kulas is that they circulate. They are magical items, according to the Trobriand Islanders. They have magical protective properties that protect the people amongst whom they are living at that time. And then they get passed on through the system. When a chief brings a kula valuable to a partner chief on another island, a kula partner, and they are lifelong kula partners if they're chiefs, then he is saying, I am giving you and gifting you with this very important magical object that will protect you and your people. And when I bring this to you, I don't expect anything in return directly. And yet, coming the other direction, that chief who gave the sulava is going to receive a mawali down the road. So, delayed, balanced reciprocity with the chief's kula valuables. Delayed, balanced. Just like, on a much smaller scale, the Yanomami at their feast, giving what the visitors want, but knowing there's going to be a return feast when they will get what they want. Delayed balanced reciprocity has this function of maintaining an alliance, right? Like with the Trobrianders in that sense, over time. Guys, this is genius. This is human genius. This has allowed these Trobriand islanders in their centralized, stratified matrilineal chiefdoms to have a politically peaceful coexistence with all of the other chiefs on all of the other islands. They haven't had warfare or feuding as far as they can remember. That's pretty amazing. So let's go back and look a little bit more at this inter-island, what goes on in the inter-island exchange. The chief brings his specialized kula, and again, I've just explained. It might look generalized. I bring you this wonderful kula. You don't have to give me anything. Please enjoy this for your people. But knowing that it will come back over time in both directions over a period of time. Delayed balanced reciprocity. To maintain a social obligation. Remember, balanced reciprocity establishes a social obligation of an eventual roughly equal return. Delayed balanced reciprocity. Now, the chief and his retinue of canoes comes to the village that's going to host them for a big feast. And first thing that happens is the chief and the people who have in-laws in the village that they're visiting will be escorted into the chief that's going to host a ceremony for them where the visiting chief will give this great kula out. Plus all the in-laws who come have brought their own lower level kula and specialized goods that they have produced in their island. And there's going to be some direct, immediate, balanced exchanges going on there. But the men who are selected but do not yet have in-laws, that have not married into the village they're visiting, and remember they're polygynous, so a man could have wives on more than one island. But let's say those men who don't have any wives in these islands that they're visiting will stay on the beach. And in the evening, they'll have this huge beach party. At that point, all the host village peoples will come over to the beach party to mingle with the men on the beach. And then they're going to have like a barter market, specialized goods from both islands. And, here are so many spoons with so many placemats or whatever, or hammocks or whatever it is. And they're going to have this direct, value for value exchange. That's one thing that goes on. A barter-based balanced reciprocity. And some small-scale kula gifting. Here are some kulas that we've collected as gifts. We're going to give them to you. But perhaps even one of the most important things that goes on in the beach party is socializing, right, with each other from the different villages, from the different islands, which, by the way, could lead to marriage. A man can have wives on different islands. So maybe he starts something up with some woman, and maybe down the road they're going to be married. Now, the next time he goes to that island, if he's married to her, he can go in as well to see his in-laws. She's going to come with him at that point if she marries, because it's patrilocal. She'll leave her island and come to live with him, right? But her brothers and mother are working the land back on that island. Pretty ingenious system for finding a way to do political balance amongst these chiefs. By the way, here's an image of the some ceremonial yams. Look how long those are. Those are very valuable chiefs' ceremonial yams. A prestige symbol, as it says. Here's at a feast. They would typically, have pigs that they slaughter for the feast, and you can tell it's a large feast by how many pigs, are being shared. We saw how the Sulava and Mawali go clockwise and counterclockwise through the system. There's the white shell Mawali, the red shell Kula, Sulava, and again, these are not to own and say, hey, look at how wealthy I am, but they're to give away. They are magical objects, and this circulates the magic that keeps them all well protected. Here's a Kula expedition canoe. You saw that on the front slide. Now, there's one more sphere of exchange. We've looked at spheres of exchange and we'll look at a chart of it in a minute, within the village, and then we've looked at it a little bit between the islands. There is one more sphere of exchange in this economic system of the Trobriand Islanders, which is what happens when a chief dies. So, again, it doesn't go to his son, because his son belongs to his wife's clan. It goes to a nephew, a sister's son. But which one? It's the chief's sisters and mother, especially the clan mother, the great mother, who is going to install the next chief. How they partly do this is that there's a funeral ceremony, a mortuary ritual for the chief that his mother and sisters have put on. Big to do. They invite everybody. Now, traditionally, the mother of the clan is going to send all of her daughters of the clan out to get banana leaf bundles from their husband's sisters. The sisters give that to them. And then the women of the clan of the chief who has died is going to weave those banana leaf bundles into banana leaf skirts. And at the mortuary ritual, the clan mother, so all the daughters have given their skirts to the mother, and at the mortuary festival, the clan mother of the dead chief gives out banana leaf skirts in such a way that it raises or lowers the status of the other clans and lineages in those clans. She's the one now who has that power to raise or level the status. Plus, she installs the next chief, one of her other sons or grandsons, through women. So, here's the chart we looked at with part 1. Let's look at it again and fill it out for the Trobriand Islanders in terms of what mechanisms of exchange and modes of reciprocity we see in their economic system. Within the village, first, we have the yam gardens, where family members fill their silos as much as they need. That's generalized reciprocity. Remember, I said generalized reciprocity is universal within families, direct immediate family. Those garden helpers that are brought in to people who have more land are given 1/2 the surplus, so therefore that's a balanced reciprocity. You worked, you get rewarded. Oragugu gifts, right, that are being given ultimately to a man's sister's husband, and if he's the many married man, then he's getting a lot of those yams going to his clan. Actually set up, and this is important, I'll circle it here, redistribution. Because it's the funneling of that surplus. Everybody gives surplus yams, but the more polygynous men get more yams. And the chief's clan gets so many yams that he gives them all out in this big redistribution feast, and he organizes the next canoe trip. So he takes care of everybody by refunneling the surplus. That's redistribution, formally. And so the feast, where it is a redistribution feast. So, and then you have, and these are spheres of exchange. I could write here spheres of exchange, the different situations that call for specific kinds of reciprocity or other mechanisms of exchange. In the inner village kula exchange between the chiefs and the in-laws and the people who come on the trip, what's happening is the chief brings his gift. You are such a magnificent chief, I bring you this mawali, or this sulava. You don't have to give me anything in return. You're just such a wonderful chief. In that sense, it looks generalized, but the knowledge is very clear that the chief that's giving will also receive from the chief he's giving to in exchange down the road when that chief makes a trip to the giving chief now's island. Delayed, balanced reciprocity for the chief's kula valuables. And the beach trade that's going on the beach for the men who don't have in-law, I could have also added the in-law exchanges. That would be direct balanced. But for those men on the beach who don't yet have in-laws, you have a balance. They bring specialized goods from their islands and trade it with each other, which is a form of market. But it's not a negative reciprocity market like we would have. It's more a barter system like you might have in the borderland of Mexico, like Nogales in Mexico. And you can negotiate the value, but it's, I give you so many wooden spoons, you give me so many bamboo placemats. Okay? And so that's a market, but it's a balanced market. It's not a negative reciprocity market. And then there's the mortuary gifts that the women of the clan give out to raise or lower the rankings relative to the chief's clan. And that's also a balanced reciprocity because people have cooperated with the chief's clan throughout the year, and they get it back in the form of gifting at the mortuary ceremony, of receiving banana leaf skirts. Notice what's not going on here. You don't see any negative reciprocity, not even like rating in this system, because it's all peaceful. There's no negative reciprocity going on. And there's no negative reciprocity market exchange. There's no money or cash involved. Now, there was a time when something new got entered into the system. I want to go back and look at this briefly. There's a woman named Annette Weiner, W-E-I-N-E-R, who in like 1972 or 1974 wrote a book called Men of Consequence, Women of Renown. No, sorry, that's the opposite. Women of Consequence, Men of Renown, about the Trobriand Islands. This anthropologist, Annette Weiner, went back to the Trobriand Islands in the 1970s, when, by the way, feminist anthropology was just emerging, to say, what are the women doing? Bronislaw Malinowski mostly studied the men. That's who he had access to. And at that time, it was, the men are what's important here. But it's a matrilineal system. What are the women doing? They own the yams. They own the land. What about them? So Weiner went back to study that. And what she found was this sphere of exchange of the distribution of the banana skirts in the mortuary ritual. But she also found that what I described to you was the traditional program of what would go on with these. But since the time Malinowski had been there had been, after World War II especially, there are now like stores and whatnot on some of these islands, Western stores. And what would happen when she was there was that when it came to but you still do have the chiefs even today, even if they're more figureheads now. But when the chief would die, she saw something was changing. Cash had been introduced. They were growing a crop, I think called beniseed, on the islands, which they could take to these stores on some of the central islands and sell them for cash. Cash had been introduced. Remember? A fluid medium of exchange with fixed values. So now when the chief died and the clan's mother was to organize a mortuary feast, her daughters were starting to say, now wait a minute. We have grown beniseed. We have cash. Why should we weave these banana leaf skirts, into banana leaf bundles into skirts and go through all that trouble when all we've got to do is go to a neighboring island store and buy banana leaf skirts already made. This levels the entire economic system, right? It symbolically levels the whole system because now the women who have chosen, not all do, but some did it when she was there, to give out these banana leaf skirts that they themselves have bought rather than collecting them as they should have through their sisters, through their husbands' sisters. Now these women who've bought the banana leaf skirts are saying, now why should I allow my mother, the clan's mother, to give these out and to raise or lower the rankings? I'll do it myself. I bought all these wonderful banana leaf skirts. I'm going to give them as gifts. Guess what? I'm going to raise a lower relative. It's threatens to dismantle the whole system, and that's what cash does in a traditional economic system. It has the chance, the potential of leveling the entire economic system of a stratified society because anybody can get cash. Then it doesn't matter what your rank is anymore, does it? Maybe you don't need to work on someone's land. You can just get cash and go buy yams at the store. So it's a very, invasive kind of influence. Okay, let's go back to this. So that's the basic approach, and you can see here how it applies, to that we can describe the economic system of the Trobrianders by looking at those factors. So again, there are still PowerPoints at the bottom of the module. You can print those out and study them before you take the quiz. But I do also want to now add back in the Yanomamo. Now here on the left, on this economic system grid for the Yanomamo, are some of the spheres of exchange that we observe in the feast film. Now, if you're being very honest, don't you can turn this slide off right now, this lecture off, and come back to it once you've finished the film report. If not, I'll show you the results. Let's look at what happens to these goods at the feast for the Yanomamo. Now notice, Yanomamo are not a chiefdom, but a tribe. They have village headmen, but no chiefs. They are egalitarian, but not centralized. They do not produce surplus. Both horticultural, but because the Trobriand Islanders are advanced horticulturists, they produce yams surplus. That changes their entire economic system. You can compare these two charts and you'll see that. The common soup at the beginning of the film, that's generalized reciprocity. Everybody puts into it whatever they can. Everybody takes out from whatever they want. When the visiting chiefs, I shouldn't say chief, I should say headman. Ooh, that's a mistake. Wait a minute. That is a mistake on the slide. There are no chiefs here for the Yanomamo. I can't write very well with this, so let me see if I can do something here. Headman. That's a headman, guys. Headman. Headman. The visiting headman's son is given gifts at the beginning of the film, right? And those seem generalized. You don't have to give anything back. Just take it back to your people. But they're going to have a feast down the road, so it will return as delayed balanced reciprocity. Then there's the big gift giving ceremony we've talked about. That's delayed balance because everybody can ask for whatever they want. And maybe it seems like fierce. Oh, you can't have my dog. You people, you're stingy. You never give us enough. It may sound negative. But guys, that's not what negative reciprocity is. That's fierce, not negative. All right? So there may be some fierceness, but the whole purpose of the giving is that there's an obligation, a social obligation of an eventual roughly equal return. The very definition on the sheet here of balanced reciprocity. Exchange of goods or services between members of different groups, often that carries a social obligation of an immediate or eventual roughly equally valued return. So that gift-giving ceremony is part of a delayed balanced reciprocity system, the whole point of which is to establish that social obligation in the form of a political alliance. At the end of the film it says they went off and they raided another village together. They formed a friendship, an alliance. Even though they're former enemies, they're not current enemies, or this wouldn't have happened at all. And while the feasting is going on, there are also some in-law exchanges. Men from the visiting group who have in-laws in the hosting group will exchange like a palmwood bow for a palmwood bow, remember? Totally equal gift. Symbolic, but it's an immediate, direct, balanced reciprocity. At the end of the film, it says that they go off raiding. Well, that's negative reciprocity, but that's the only negative reciprocity you see in this film, is if they go and they raid another village. All right, so that's it. Always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, lwatts@uccs.edu. Again, I recommend that you print out the still PowerPoints at the end of the module, and you can use that as a study guide while you're listening to all of this. And so we will move on.